Suu Kyi deserves this praise and more after she devoted 28 years of her life to helping her native people achieve their goal of a free and open Burma. Out of these 28 years, she spent 10 years on the campaign trail, enduring verbal, physical, and mental harassment from the government. 5 months were spent in Myanmar's harshest prison, and 16 years were spent isolated in her own home, disconnected from the outside world. Even after all the punishment, Suu Kyi stayed true to her core Buddhist beliefs of nonviolence and forgiveness. These principles were viewed as exploitable weaknesses by the powerful Slork party, but to the surprise of many, all her weak traits bound together formed strong like iron. This quality about Suu Kyi gave her many nicknames such as the Iron Butterfly. Aung San Suu Kyi was born on June 19, 1945 in Yangon, Myanmar. As the only daughter of war hero and political activist Aung San Suu Kyi was born a famous Burmese person. Suu Kyi lived peacefully in Yangon with her mom for 2 years until crisis struck. In 1947, Aung San's political rivals, the SLORC party, hired a hitman to kill him. With the backbone of their family ripped out, Kin Chi introduced Buddhism to Suu Kyi to try and stop the hurting. Kin Chi started meditating with her, teaching Buddhist lessons such as forgiveness, nonviolence, and selflessness. Suu Kyi received these lessons well, committing them to memory, and using them throughout her life. Suu Kyi received her primary education in Yangon. After her primary schooling, Kin Chi took the job as the ambassador to India and Nepal, and took Suu Kyi to India in 1960. While in India, she attended the Covenant of Jesus and Mary School, learning in school as well as from the cities surrounding her. Suu Kyi learned about the nonviolent methods of Mahatma Gandhi, and that his ideals were centered around the well-being of the country rather than himself. After an enriching experience in India, Suu Kyi went on to attend school in England at Oxford, where she studied philosophy, economics, and politics. She stayed in England a total of 18 years, meeting her soulmate Michael Eris while there. She was enjoying her life in England until one day in 1988, Suu Kyi received an urgent phone call. While Suu Kyi was away from Myanmar, the Slork party ruined the country's former greatness. Before 1962 and the rise of the Slork party, Myanmar was one of the richest countries in Southeast Asia. After they took power, Myanmar's well-being plummeted, quickly becoming the poorest country in Southeast Asia. Instead of leading Asia in rice exportation, the farmers converted their farms to grow illegal substances. Myanmar became known as the heart of the Golden Triangle because of the amount of opium and heroin produced there. Due to this, 48% of the population of Myanmar contracted the AIDS virus by using these drugs with dirty needles. Most people earned less than $1 a day for their income. Even though the citizens were suffering, the military leaders lived in lavish mansions. Tensions rose between the citizens and government. Suu Kyi returned to Myanmar in 1988 at the beginning of the 8888 protests. These protests were the first time Suu Kyi saw the horrors of U Ne Win's iron-fisted rule. During the first part of the protest, students gathered all over Yangon to protest their unfair treatment. These peaceful protests lasted for only 6 days until the government cracked down. Soldiers fired automatic guns and threw grenades as well to wound the protesters. The soldiers did not stop there, though. Many ran into hospitals treating the wounded citizens. When inside, they would shoot anyone treating the victims. Protesters were shocked, but they continued protesting, and after fighting fearlessly, 1,500 citizens were murdered within the first week. The protesters kept on, and although there is no official record, the estimates of deaths by the end of 1988 ranged from 5,000 to 10,000 people. Aung San Suu Kyi tried to stop the madness early on by speaking to the people of Myanmar at the holiest Buddhist site, Shwedagon Pagoda. She emphasized to the 500,000 attendees to peacefully protest the government, but her words fell on deaf ears. The revolts continued just as before. A month later, Suu Kyi founded the National League for Democracy. She and the NLD started making regular trips to rural villages and big cities alike, promoting democracy as a better government than the Hutu regime they laid mercy to at the moment. Slork's henchmen kept harassing Suu Kyi, trying to deter her from speaking by shoving and swearing at her, but Suu Kyi stayed vigilant and spoke everywhere she could. Suu Kyi and the NLD made tremendous progress educating the people about democracy, but the government put her under house arrest to keep her from running in the 1990 elections. The citizens were undeterred, and on election day, the NLD won by a landslide. The Slork party crafted the message that the election picked out members for a constitutional drafting committee, instead of for the government. The citizens were outraged by the 60s, yet they stayed nonviolent in their protests. Only after the government started threatening to kill did the protesters leave. Suu Kyi heard about the news while under house arrest and started to protest. She went on hunger strike and lost 10 pounds off her already light frame. After 7 years of confinement, Suu Kyi was finally released, but her movements and speech were heavily restricted. Unable to leave her house, the people came to her and so started the gate talks. These gate talks continued every weekend, with Suu Kyi talking to the people about different aspects of democracy. After 1.5 years, Suu Kyi was able to leave her house and talk about democracy again. The Slork detested what the lady was doing to their power, so they decided to stop it.
When they decided she was just so popular, they felt they could be overthrown, so they determined to kill her at Day Inn. Thugs hired by the government swept out at twilight out of trucks and attacked Suu Kyi's convoy with bamboo rods and metal rods and beat her supporters to death. At one point, the young students who guarded her made a little circle around her car to protect her car, to keep these thugs from getting to her. And they said, "Run, Auntie, run," and she wouldn't leave. She wouldn't leave. She wanted to stay. And many of those students were beaten to death. They had trained these thugs to aim for their head. And one of the most horrifying images from that scene were the many witnesses, and I talked to quite a few, who said that they will never forget the sound of people's heads popping open, splitting open. Women raped, thrown to the ground, beaten, held by their heads beaten on the ground. It was a terrible, terrible slaughter. Suu Kyi's driver had the presence of mind to hit the accelerator and drive out. It got through the crowd and got down the road, only to be apprehended by some soldiers when she was thrown into insane prison, which is one of the worst gulags in the world. She was thrown into insane prison, and it's only because of the outcry from the world, from the international community, that she was released from insane prison back to her home. But then she was held totally incommunicado for the next 7 years, if you can imagine that. 7 years totally incommunicado.
This inexcusable act by the government stirred the beating heart of Myanmar out of its slumber. Being the highest moral authority in Myanmar, the government tried to hush the monks by force. The response to the protests consisted of the public shooting of a monk and other vicious acts upon them. This commenced the beginning of the Saffron Revolution. Everyone not including the government started protesting the Slork Party, with the protests stretching across the country. The government's response included disrobing thousands of monks, arresting them, raiding monasteries, and sentencing about 20,000 people to years of hard labor within a week's period. That roughly translates to 2 people being arrested every minute. This reaction quickly ended the Saffron Revolution, but the desire for a democratic government burned deep in the heart of all Burmese people. While the Saffron Revolution was going on, Suu Kyi was transferred from prison to house arrest again. The government extended her house arrest so she could not run in the 2010 elections. After being released, Suu Kyi toured and promoted her pro-democratic views when on March 15, 2016, Hitin Kya of the NLD became the first democratic president in 50 years. The election of one of her candidates marked one of the biggest milestones in the journey to turn Myanmar democratic. Now that Suu Kyi has opened the door to the West, Myanmar citizens want to assimilate and pass up all of their dark days.
You must not underestimate our people. I may be the figurehead of the organization, but they are in this movement because they believe in it, not because of me, and they take full responsibility for their own deeds. And those who are supporting the NLD are not supporting me. They are supporting the movement for democracy. And any support I may have is because they think that I will be able to help bring about democracy.